Welcome to the digitalpoliticspodcast.com show. I'm Karen Jagoda, president of eVoter Institute. My guest today is Josh Justice. He's the CEO of Peerly, Peerly.com, and the topic today is the role of text messaging in all campaigns. So I want to welcome you back to the show today, Josh. I appreciate you taking a few minutes to be with us.
Thank you very much, Karen. It's always a pleasure to be on your podcast.
Oh, thank you. Here we are in April of 2026, and I'm curious if optimizing for mobile is still an element of campaign strategies, or has mobile become the driving force of the strategy?
Yeah, it's a good question, Karen. It wasn't that long ago. You can go back just a few years ago where you heard a lot of talk about mobile optimization. And, you got to make sure your website's optimized for mobile and some of your digital. That was a big push. We went through it ourselves. And now let's say there's been just a massive change just in one cycle. So in a 4-year period, we went from having to optimize everything for mobile to it being the predominant source of consumption of information and media. So I think we're now safely beyond optimization for mobile. Mobile is the main channel. Every single stat backs that up. More people consume content on mobile than any other device, than any other format. So at this point in time, it's no longer about optimizing for mobile. It's the main channel. Everything has to be mobile focused. And then if anything, you may want to then consider, optimizing for other things outside of that. Start with mobile and then branch out. That's what I would say.
And mobile means it's that size screen. It's not your giant screen on the wall in your living room. And it also gives you, as an advertiser, the ability to send a text to someone who is watching. So how important is texting when it comes to a successful campaign strategy?
Yeah, so touching on what you just said about the small screen is the small screen is now dominant. You have 69% of online content consumed on the small screen on the go. 75% of mobile traffic is digital video streams at this point in time. There's countless studies on this, as well as 95% of, let's say video that people are watching on their devices is retained as opposed to text. So the small screen is dominant, and the rich content that you can actually target directly to a voter on the small screen is really what's winning today, and we're seeing a massive shift into.
And say a little bit more about that shift that you're seeing in political texting.
Okay, so when peer-to-peer texting is not a new technology, but let's put an age on it, and let's say peer-to-peer texting became very prominent in 2019 and 2020, and that was partly because of FCC rulings and some of the campaigns that happened at that time. At that time, the prominent use of peer-to-peer texting was one-way, simple SMS messages. Can we count on your support? Will you click on this link and go make a donation? In 2022, 2023, and it wasn't a long time ago. This is all unfolded actually just over the last 6 years. So by the time we get into 2021, 2022, we start seeing MMS becoming more popular. That's where people are attaching images to their text messages. And it was probably by the time we got to mid-2022, MMS became dominant over SMS. Of course, the difference is think SMS as being plain, simple text. MMS is rich content like pictures and files. Then we move into 2022, we introduced True HD video texting, the ability to actually show HD video content on text messaging. And we sat back and we thought, look, we've changed the game. Everything's going to change now. And much like SMS to MMS, it took some time, probably a couple of years, because we introduced it in 2022. It wasn't until 2024, 2 years later of us, rattling the chains and telling everybody about this amazing technology and the ability to, cut through social media algorithms and political censorship and take your message and your video content directly to the voter. Well, at that time, it took time. Nobody really seemed to care until 2024, and that changed. Then we started seeing video for the very first time actually being used almost as much as MMS. At this point in time, SMS has now faded into the background. So now you have competing MMS, which is pictures and targeted pictures, reinforcing platform, and then you have video. And then that brings us to, of course, 2025, 2026, where now we have video in motion, which is no longer HD, it's actually 4K clarity. And we've combined, artificial intelligence, and we've combined a number of other tools directly into the video content. So there's been a large evolution over the last 5-6 years from plain text all the way now to 4K clarity video. And it makes a lot of sense when you think about a lot of budgets being spent on television and streaming and video content, where every single one of those mediums failed to do one thing: deliver your content to the exact individual and the exact demographic that you want to deliver it to at the exact time. It doesn't matter how much money you spend. It doesn't matter how many consultants or how many ad people you have. You will never be able to target your video as closely as you would be able to with a tool like Video in Motion. And it's a fraction of the cost. So now we're starting to see texting moving into this whole new category with the ad guys and with the video guys and the video purchasers. And now you see some of these giants that are incorporating video texting and Video in Motion with their ad buy packages for the campaign. So instead of just buying a market or penetration locally and through some streaming platforms, now they're also incorporating video texting. That's a massive, massive change, Karen. That's something that was unheard of just a few years ago, because this is an old established market. I don't need to tell you that. You've been doing this for so long. For 2 decades, you've been doing this. The way that commercials are purchased and the buying industry is heavily protected. It's a very valuable industry. They don't let a lot of new technologies in. And the fact that now they themselves are offering this shows you that there is a shift. There's a change that's happening. It's all around mobile.
Well, thank you for that great history and emphasis on the risk aversion that a lot of these people have. But now they feel like they're falling behind, I think, if they're not using mobile and not using this advanced technology that you just described. But I wanted to go back to your point about AI now coming onto the scene and how that is being used in this environment. And one thing I suspect it's being used for is to create the videos in the first place. So say a little bit more about where you see AI really being useful and where it's just a shiny object.
So you are completely right. When we think of AI, I would pretty much break it into a dozen different types of categories, each one of them having tremendous effects on politics and everything in the world. We decided to take a slightly different approach. So, of course, we innovated AMP AI, and we wanted to foresee and try to get ahead of potential issues. One being generative AI in politics. We believe texting is still a very grassroots technology, allowing a campaign to communicate with voters at scale. So we thought if we incorporate generative AI into our AI program, then there could be a disingenuous feeling for the voter. So then we thought, how can we use the power of AI without losing that grassroots feel, or without incorporating pure generative AI into it? And also, there's a lot of new laws and rules and regulations, Karen, and you probably heard of this all throughout the country. So now there's all these little landmines everybody has to be careful not to step in when using generative AI. So what we did was we decided to use AI for its massive ability for processing power and as an extra set of hands or an extra set of 1,000 hands. So we use AI to process massive amounts of inbound data. So if you think about it, you send out a text message, you have 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 people reply. Well, that has always traditionally been useless data because we do not have enough volunteers or humans on any campaign. It doesn't matter what campaign does not have the resources to go through 300,000, let alone 3 million replies. But yet this is good data. Our industry is always touted as being the cutting edge of data and precision and targeting. But in all reality, there's not the resources to do it the way they display it in the movies. It doesn't actually happen. So we use AI to actually go and look at all these responses and categorize them and apply sentiment analysis on them. And then we can act. And this goes directly to your question. Now what we can do is we can queue up a response that is from the campaign's own words or campaign's own templates and actually send that reply directly to that voter and have a conversation with the voter. But instead of it being generative through generative video or generative AI or an AI bot, this is actually campaign content that's approved by the campaign. And now the voter is able to essentially conversate or ask some questions and go back and forth on policy or go back and forth on, making a donation, but not through a mindless AI bot, but through actual structured campaign responses that campaigns would pre-approve. And we just essentially match. We match we look at it, we match the inbound response to the correct outbound response, and we can send it, allowing a campaign to process hundreds of thousands of messages as well as to communicate at the same time, right? So that's our take on AI, is using AI to process massive amounts of data and to try to open up communication a little bit more with far more voters.
I appreciate that. A great example. And I'm wondering, in the old days when campaigns sent emails, did they expect people to respond to the emails? And if they did they do anything with those responses?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the answer is, as far as I know, and we're not in the email business, but as far as I know, no. It was always a one-way communication channel. When peer-to-peer texting took off, the whole concept was finally we have a tool that we're going to be able to communicate back and forth at scale. But there was one thing that we overlooked, including myself. We all overlooked it. And it's nobody has the time to sit and go back and forth with hundreds of thousands of people. So it started just being used as essentially a new age email tool, a one-way blast, which defeated the purpose and the power of the tool being able to actually have a conversation. So it's similar. One great way of looking at this technology is canvassing. And we have a product. We have a product called Canvasser AI. It's canvasser.com if you want to check it out. And if you think about canvassing, we send out groups of volunteers and they go and they knock on doors. Sometimes we're lucky enough to get the candidate out. Sometimes we're doing, sometimes there's a proposition or voter registration, or we're doing voter ID, or we're campaigning. But we have to go and we have to knock on doors. And when we do that, we can maybe talk to 10 people in an hour. If we're really, really fast, and we can knock on 50, 60, maybe 100 doors. Usually you're going to see around 10% of the doors you hit, you're going to actually be able to talk to someone. And then out of that 10%, maybe a few people might be interested. The others might slam the door on you. But we all agree, look, that's the baseline grassroots campaign that we grew up with. So how can we use AI to still keep the grassroots, but amplify that and look at it completely differently? So that's one thing we've done recently with Canvasser AI. So there's no other tool on earth that allows a campaign to canvass millions of voters simultaneously with real-time two-way conversations, structured data capture, and campaign-approved messaging at scale than using this product. And in the time that it takes the opposition, for example, to speak to 10 people at the door, we can canvass 1 million voters. And we can do it back and forth without losing that grassroots, because we can ask questions and we can answer questions. And we can do it all through campaign structured replies.
I'd say that's an extremely smart application. Makes me wonder, what is the sweet spot of communicating with voters? If you send out 3 messages a day, that can get a little annoying. If you only reach out a couple times a month, that might be irrelevant. So, what is, from your experience, what does seem to be the sweet spot?
You're right, and I see where you're kind of going or implying with that, and people don't like talking about it, but less is more. I don't believe that we should be harassing voters or sending voters multiple messages a day or even multiple messages a week. I don't see why. Now, if a voter has chosen to want specific updates from the campaign, that's different. And we offer short codes here, and we have voters every single day, millions and millions of voters that are signing up and asking for information on a dozen topics. In that case, they might get 4, 5, 6 text messages a day. They want this. This is the content they want. Then you have other voters that aren't looking to get multiple messages a day. And that's where we believe that your message has to stand out. It has to mean something. And you can't think of it in terms of, I'm just going to get them tomorrow. You think of it that this is the one and only message you're going to send to them during the entire election. And if that's the case, how are we going to make this one count? Well, we can make it count by adding 4K clarity video to the message. We can make it count by personalizing the message, which our system allows, or by engaging them and asking them a question and getting a dialogue formed. So there are ways that you can still communicate very, very effectively without having to blast these people all day long. We don't believe in it. We absolutely don't believe in it. Our clients don't subscribe to this. So, I mean, hopefully that answers your question. That's not the most popular response in our industry, right? Because texting providers want you to send out 20 messages a day to a voter, but not only do we not subscribe to it, we don't allow it.
Yeah, and also you're pointing out how all voters aren't alike. There are some out there, and we'll call them nerds, or something in a favorable term. They want the details. They want the up-to-date information. So it's great to be able to supply that to them, but also to understand that voters are busy and have other interests, but you still want to reach out to them and let them know that you're still interested in what they're thinking. So it's not just a one-way communication where you're blasting out a message, but you're opening the door to saying, hey, let us know what you're thinking about this, or answer this question or something. So don't you think that personalized, interactive approach really just changes the whole environment of communication with a campaign?
Oh, yes, it does. So I don't know if you've heard of this term. There's an interesting term that's now coming out, and it's called AI slop. And the term AI slop is, and I'll get back to your question, but the term AI slop is, we're all seeing these AI videos flood social media and flood the internet, and they're just getting to the point where they're a little bit ridiculous, and people start tuning them out, and it's called slop. I believe that we see the same thing in politics. We see a lot of slop because campaigns just want to keep on dumping and dumping and dumping fairly irrelevant material to voters. And it could be 10 fundraising asks, all the same message, or it could be the same picture or the same thing over and over again. It's not terribly creative, and I kind of put it in that same category. I'll define it right now. I'll call it SMS or text message slop. And of course, we're in a great position to speak about this because we do billions and billions of messages. So I'm just saying that we don't need to contribute to slop out there. Instead, what we can do is we can send rich, thoughtful, personalized material. Like you mentioned, we can talk about the actual voter. We can use the insights from past conversations to strengthen this particular appeal. And we can actually make the experience way more meaningful without it costing more and without it being more taxing on the campaign. So then you wonder, why aren't we doing it? Well, there is a number of people that are starting to do this, but it's not nearly as widespread as it should be. And that's why we still have tons of text messages going to voters and annoying voters, and they tune them out. But we see the metrics. We can see that when you put the time into your message and you personalize it, when you add a video, We can track clicks. We can see how much higher the click rate is. We track fundraising dollars. We can see how much more money comes per click for fundraising, and we can also track stops, Karen. That's when people get upset and they reply stop because they don't want any more messages. And you are it's slightly about in the low 90s percent more likely to get a stop on a basic SMS message than you are on a rich text, video, or MMS message. So you're increasing your chance exponentially of getting your message across by just taking your time and actually producing something decent.
And so my last question is, what advice do you have for political strategists about using texting to drive turnout for primary elections?
Yeah, this one is easy, and you don't have to take my word for it because there's ample studies on this at this point in time. If you're not using video or video in motion, you're crazy. You got to use video in your messages. If you want to drive turnout or you want someone to know about your candidate, then they are going to watch the video. Send them a video on your phone or on their phone. As I said, 69% of online content is consumed on the small screen. 75% of all mobile traffic is digital video streams, and 70% of cellular traffic is video consumption. Voters have already told you what they want and what they consume. They consume video, and they consume video on their phone. So don't send them a boring message. Send them that same video that would go and get dumped into a local market that nobody will see because nobody watches TV anymore. They're watching something on the bus or at the park or, on their break. Send it to them on their phone and give them a call to action and make it possible for them to communicate back and forth using some of our AI tools. And you're going to end up having way, way better success than some of the older traditional means of communication. So if you're a modern campaign, you got to move into this modern era. If you're not a modern campaign, you're going to be left behind and ignore these tools. That's what I'd say.
Thanks to my guest today, Josh Justice, CEO of Purely, Purely.com. I'm Karen Jagoda, host of the Digital Politics Podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.